This is Denny Cherry. Welcome to Moving Databases with Detach Attach. So the easiest way to move a database is to use SQL Server Management Studio. You simply locate the database in Object Explorer that you'd like to move, then right-click on that database and select the Detach option. That will then remove the database from the database engine, allowing you to move the physical files from one hard drive to another, and then you can reattach using Management Studio again. The nice thing about using Management Studio to do the attach and detach, when you go to detach the database, it automatically disconnects the users. If you're going to detach the database using Transact SQL, using the sp_detach_db system stored procedure, if there are users using the database, you may need to put the database into single user mode by using the alter database with rollback immediate syntax as needed, to make sure that all the users are disconnected and that the database is then in single user mode before you're able to detach the database. If the users are already disconnected from the system, there's no need to change the state of the database. Simply detach the database and the system will detach the database without any additional changes. So let's go ahead and look at how we actually do an attach and detach operation. We have the Northwind database that we're going to go ahead and detach and then reattach. Now to detach the database, we simply right-click on the database, select Tasks, and then select Detach. This brings up a nice window that asks us if we're sure we want to do what we're asking the database engine to do. We also have the ability to drop all connections and the ability to update the statistics if we so desire. The only reason to really update the statistics when you're detaching it is if they're extremely old and out of date. If you have a job that does update statistics periodically, or you know your statistics are current, there's no reason to check this box, as it simply makes the process take longer. You'll see the status column here shows that the database is ready to be detached. If we script this operation out, we'll see the exact T-SQL commands which are used to actually do the database detach command. So let's go ahead and cancel out of this window and look at the actual T-SQL statement. As you can see here, the first thing the SQL Server is doing is putting the database into single user mode with rollback immediate. This tells SQL Server to take all the transactions that are currently connected to the system and roll them back. Once that is completed, and all the users' connections have been terminated and their transactions safely rolled back, we can then detach the database using the sp_detach_db system stored procedure. We specify a database name of Northwind, and the database will then be detached when we execute this batch. So we run it, our command is completed successfully. We then can refresh the window in the Object Explorer, and we'll get back the list of databases missing the Northwind database. At this point, you would go ahead and then move the database to whatever location it needed to be moved to. Attaching databases in Management Studio is about as easy. You go within the Object Explorer, right-click on the database folder within the Object Explorer, and select the Attach Database option. You'll then be presented a GUI, which will then prompt you to browse to the location of the MDF file. Once you've found the MDF file, it will read the locations of all the other data files. Simply correct the paths as they are presented. The nice thing about using Management Studio is it makes a nice, easy way for attaching databases that have lots of database files. When you're doing an attached database operation in T-SQL, you have to list out every database file that you wish to include, which would be all the database files. There is no option for listing out only some of them. Additionally, Management Studio gives you an easy option for rebuilding the transaction log if the transaction log has been corrupted or it's been lost during the file copy operation. I'll show you how to do that during the demo. Let's go ahead and close the window we had open before, and let's go ahead and do an attach operation. We right-click on the Databases folder and select the Attach option. This brings up the GUI that I mentioned earlier. We click the Add button and select the data file we wish to attach. In this case, the northwind.mdf. It then reads from the northwind.mdf file and finds all the other database files. In this case, the northwind_log.ldf file is the second data file that's in there. If we wish to attach the database and generate a new transaction log file for some reason, simply select the transaction log file from this list and click Remove. In order for this operation to work, the location of the transaction log file as it's currently referenced must exist, because the transaction log file will be created at that location. Once you've specified the current path to all the database files, and the message column is clear, you'll then want to go ahead and click OK. That will then attach the database. As you can see, the Object Explorer has updated and the database has been reattached to the database engine. While this did go extremely quickly, it should always go fairly fast. While the database in my system is incredibly small because it is only a small sample database, even incredibly large multi-terabyte databases will attach very quickly. Because attaching a database basically means opening the file, reading the system tables, and bringing the database online. It'll take about as long as it would take to restart the database instance and bring the database online that way. So detaching a database using T-SQL uses the sp_detach_db system stored procedure. As I showed during the initial demo, we use the alter database with immediate rollback to disconnect users from the database before actually detaching the database. Attaching a database in T-SQL requires using one of three different methods. The first is to use the sp_attach_db system stored procedure. That will attach a database where you know where all the files are. The sp_attach_db_single_file system stored procedure will attach the database and regenerate the transaction log file. The create database statement can also be used when using specific parameters to attach the database. Most people don't use the create database syntax unless very, very specific circumstances have presented themselves. Usually that involves databases that have lots and lots of database files. The reason for that is that the sp_attach_db system stored procedure only supports databases with a few files. Once you get into larger numbers of files, you have to use the create database syntax. When doing the operation in T-SQL, it does require knowing the location of all the database files, as you have to specify each one of them in any one of those three methods. In summary, you can attach databases using either Management Studio or T-SQL, as well as detaching databases with either Management Studio or T-SQL. Management Studio does provide a much easier experience and is much simpler for users to do the attach and the detach process. It gives you the benefit of presenting the T-SQL code to you so that you don't have to write it all out by hand. Using T-SQL does provide a repeatable process where Management Studio does not. However, the odds of having to have a repeatable process for a database detach and attach are fairly slim, as that is typically a one-off operation.